Here we are at Lewis Skinner Botanical Garden on a beautiful early spring day surrounded by flowers. It's so special, but these flowers tell you more than just spring's coming.
These flowers here on the bellflower cherry and the other spring blooming trees are telling me to get up and start observing nature because big changes are about to happen.
Exactly. And why do you want to take that time to observe nature, though?
I think it's important to understand the interconnected and seasonal changes of the plants and animals in the world around us in general, but also because the timing of those life cycle events is so important between the organisms to make sure we have a healthy ecosystem. And so making observations on those seasonal changes really contributes to a better understanding.
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up knowing that when the shad bush bloomed, the shad were running in the Hudson River and that it was time to start fishing. But that's a connection there that people don't really, when you break it down to, is here's a seasonal occurrence of this one plant blooming connected with the migration of a fish in the river.
Exactly.
And we have so many other connections like that.
We really do. And we call those seasonal changes in the life cycle events of plants and animals, we call that phenology. Things we think about all the time are the bulbs breaking, the early crocus and narcissus and daffodils. They are all blooming and we get excited about that. Our spring flowering trees and shrubs, we pay a lot of attention to that.
Yes, we do. And what we need to understand is that those triggers, those blossoms, those bulbs emerging are connected with the day length, the temperature, as well as just the amount of rain even.
And there's a lot of variables that go into tracking those seasonal changes, but we have programs in place that let us track those years and years and years, a long running set of data. So we can understand when the extra rain is just a one-off or the extra warm winter, like I feel like we've had this past year, is making some early changes.
Exactly. And we think about record keeping, and I know for, doing a little reading myself, is that in Japan with the Cherry Blossom Festival, which is such an important part of their culture, is that they've been tracking cherry blossoms since the 6th century, so that they could determine when the blooms would occur and so that they could set their festival date.
And I think you're bringing up the point that everyone pays attention to these changes in plant and animal life around them, even if they didn't know that that was called phenology. Some people plan trips around them, right? We want to know when to go up to Washington, D.C. for the Cherry Blossom Festival, or if you're like me, when to hit fall foliage at peak time.
Out in the mountains.
Out in the mountains. That would be the trip that I would make. But farmers and gardeners, they need to know when to plant, when to prune. Have you heard when to prune your roses? When the forsythia bloom is one that I always had heard before.
Yes,
so
many connections. Earlier, we were at the Glenstream area, and I saw a lot of things happening down there. So what other events are you tracking here at Lewis Skinner?
We have a number of different volunteer groups that are helping us track some of those seasonal changes. One is the Bluebird Trail. So volunteers from the Virginia Bluebird Society have 17 bluebird boxes that they monitor. That group of volunteers has been coming out since 2007.
Wow.
And so they are very dedicated.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Another project that we have is the Blue Orchard Bee Houses. And we have installed 3 of those built by the River Run chapter of the Virginia Master Naturalists.
Wonderful.
They are down at the Glenstream as well. And so we are excited to see if we have enough new habitat after that project to observe some of those solitary bees nesting and reproducing in those houses. And finally, we have frog watch data down there. And that is an observation protocol that we have volunteers from another group of master naturalists that come out and some staff member that listen for the frog watches. And all of those observations actually are not just put in the notebook and kept here. We send that and contribute it to a bigger body of data. And I think it's important that a project as big as that, Glenstream Restoration, is made possible only by the grants from the National Fish and Wildlife Federation and the Virginia Environmental Endowment.
Wonderful support.
And that support comes from us also being able to articulate how bad those changes are needed down there in that area.
When we were down there and we were walking and talking, you had shared you'd gone to Maymont to learn about frog watch, and that you all were just stunned at silence.
Silence, Right. And we knew they were frogs and toads here because we could hear them and be jealous of them
Yes.
over in other areas of the garden. But we do expect that habitat recreation is going to be a big boon for the nature, the wildlife, the insects, and the birds.
Who knew that just a citizen science program or a phenology, listening, observing nature, could give you the data to say, hey, we've got a problem here, and to be able to then find the funding. And I know in a few years that restoration is just going to be beautiful.
Right.
Maymont's been involved with Frog Watch for years, and it's fascinating for the environmental staff to share with us the results of their data.
Right.
They heard the frogs early this year, they heard the frogs later, maybe another year, and it's a trend that we can, I'll say, just be aware. And with tracking it, it now becomes data.
And it's publicly available. Frog Watch, the Virginia Bluebird Society has data, and Nature's Notebook, which is another project, part of the USA National Phenology Network, where anybody can gather data on phenology, those seasonal changes, and submit it to a body of data that is used by natural resource managers, by researchers, and is available to the public. So we can see those long-term trends in the changes of over 1,400 plants and animals that are tracked by Nature's Notebook.
That's excellent. And this is not just in the United States. This is worldwide. This tracking is happening.
Right. By understanding the life cycles of plants and animals, we can use resources in an efficient and effective way. Yeah. So if you understand the life cycle of a pest in your plant, you'll know exactly when you can apply pesticides in the smallest amount to get the most efficacy for that. Same with fertilizers in your lawn. If you understand the life cycle of the grass in your lawn, you'll know when you can apply fertilizer so that it's used by the plant and not that it runs off and it goes into our stormwater or our drains.
We have to move away from just blindly doing something because it's April and more to understanding the life cycles around us. So as you're saying, our applications are effective and efficient, but not at all damaging.
Right. So. And it's interesting, we kind of note these little items as bullet points, but all of these relationships are so tightly interwoven. And I think observing those life cycle changes allows us all to understand and be more in tune with them.
Which is very important.
Yeah, we need to really, really pay attention to the world, the natural world around us.
We do. Laurel, this has been fascinating, and I thank you so much for sharing the citizen scientist work of what you've actually been doing and also what the master naturalists have been doing in our community, and to be able to explain to us more about phenology and the importance of how it proves statistically that everything is so interconnected.
Exactly. We have so many people, a whole community of people out there working on these different projects, and it's really inspiring.
It is. Well, thank you for inspiring us.
Pleasure.